I think we are good to go now. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for coming. I didn't introduce myself. I'm Josh Muse. I'm with the Department of Libraries. I'm the technology consultant, but today I am walking people through the salary survey that we've put together and are just launched. So thanks everyone for coming. So the salary survey, I'll just jump right into it. The salary survey has been sort of kicking around as an idea in my head, at least for a while. And we've had some back and forth and feedback and so on, and more than a couple of iterations of it, but we finally launched a version last week. So things to know, if this is a quick 12 things to know about the survey, many of which you probably already know from the emails and such. But first off, survey is a two-part online survey that we're using to document salary, benefits, and related information for public libraries. Part one, the one that's open right now, is for directors, just directors. Let me rephrase, is for information about directors. Part two, which we're going to launch in about next week, I think, is going to cover all other staff. So the survey is for, the intention is it's once per library. It's not, individual staff shouldn't be filling it out. It is once per library. It can be the director or whoever the director wants to fill it out, or the chair of the board, whatever works, but we just want one per library. Okay, so that was thing number one. Number two, what's the survey for? The intention is that it's going to be useful for individuals, for directors, for boards, for staff members, as well as being useful to VT-Lib and any other state organizations. So the hope is that it's at least as useful to individual libraries. That's a big part of our motivation for doing it. Most states have some form of salary survey in their annual report. There's some version of it. They vary from very short to very detailed. But we haven't had one historically. So we've decided we wanted to get involved with that and put one out. One thing that folks at other states have told me is that it is consistently the thing that people ask for the most. It's the data that is most requested from the public libraries, or the annual report data. So we figured that meant that it would hopefully be useful. Okay, so what happens with the data afterwards? Once we're done with the survey, data is going to go out and will be released publicly in sort of two pieces, much like to some degrees, like the annual report. The first is a spreadsheet of everything that everybody submitted, including your library name. So it's going to be a big list, and it's going to have answer under, library Q, library Z, etc. Second part is going to be averages. We're going to have a bunch of averages based on broken out by things like library demographics, like population, budget, hours, etc., and then staff demographics for directors at least, and things like experience and the like. So hopefully there will be a bunch of averages there for people to draw conclusions. Okay, so I said that the default is going to be a big spreadsheet, your library name, and all the things that you include, all the things that you answered in it. However, there is an option to anonymize your data if you want to. This is certainly, since this is the first time we're doing that, we want to get as many people as involved as we can, and so we want to give that option. So there's going to be a question on the survey that says, do you want to anonymize your data? And the default is no, but if you say yes, what happens is your data will not go into the big spreadsheet that's a list of answers. You just won't be there. However, your data will go into all the averages. So you'll still be included in all the statewide and local and et cetera averages, but no one will be able to see what library, your library being listed. The one exception to that is we will see it because it's still going to be in the survey. So I'll see it, but it won't go out anywhere. So that is the option for anonymizing your data. Okay. Next from that, participation in the survey is totally voluntary, like totally voluntary. We'd like people to participate because we think it's going to be useful, but if for whatever reason you are uncomfortable with this, there's no pressure. It's a library by library decision. So that's part one. Two, If there are pieces of it that you either don't want to answer, don't feel comfortable answering, or don't have the data, you can skip them. Everything except for the very beginning that's contact information in it is is sort of optional. Nothing is going to stop you from filling out the survey. So I will say the more data we have, the more useful this is going to be to people down the line. But at the end of the day, you're making decisions about what your library wants to do this time. Okay, let's see. So the survey is fairly long. Part 1 is 25 questions. Part 2, which covers all staff, and all staff is broken down in a bunch of categories, has 65 questions. I will say that if there is a section, a category where you don't have any staff in that, you can just skip it. So it will probably end up being shorter than 65 for most libraries, except for the very, very largest. But it's still long. And because we're using Microsoft Forms and just a standard form, there's no way to save it. So you have to do it in one sitting. Because of that, I strongly recommend that you have the information ahead of time, that you have it written down. You don't have to go looking while you're in the middle of it, and then maybe your browser closes and you're suddenly lose all the data. So we have worksheets for part 1 and part 2 separated on our the web page. My recommendation there, it's in Word format, so you can just open it up, you can type in it, or you can print it out and write on it. But I think that that's going to be easier for most people to have it all written down ahead of time. Okay, so unlike the annual report, we want you to answer it as of today. You don't need to think about your reporting period. Fiscal years don't matter. It's independent of that. It's just as of today. Additional piece to that is, but the sort of exception is, we want you to list all budgeted positions, even if they're not filled. So if you have a spot that there's not a person in, but there's supposed to be a person in, or there will be a person in, just treat it like it exists, like that position is there. Okay, a few other smaller questions. Some of the questions ask for a pay range as though the positions were offered today. I know that's hard. If you're not hiring, you don't necessarily have those numbers available, and we know that's hard. But the reason we ask it that way is because asking for when the position was filled is just a weird moving target, and it doesn't seem like that information would be terribly useful. And also, when we got feedback on this, people were very interested in the starting range. So I know it's a hard question. It may require some work. In some cases, you may not be able to come up with a number. Of course, that's fine. But that's why it's there, and that's why it's written that way. Okay, averages. A few of the questions on the staff side, because you may have more than one staff in a category, ask for averages. So just what we want you to do is, if you have 3 employees and you're like figuring out their average wage, for example, we want you to add them all up and then divide by that number. We don't want you to estimate. We prefer, we don't want to see any estimates in this, and if possible, we really want to get actual averages. Okay, timeline. Part 1 is currently open, is open right now. Part 1, again, is the questions about directors. Part 2 is going to launch next Thursday, which is March 24th. And then everything, the whole survey altogether, is going to close on Friday, April 15th. Part 1 stays open the whole period. Part 2 is only open starting on the 24th. We did that just because throwing an 80-question survey at you that you've never seen before seemed like a lot, so we wanted to just do it in chunks. But yeah, so everything, so part 1's open now, part 2 opens next Thursday. Everything is due on April 15th, which is another deadline, as I recall. Okay, a couple minor things. You will not be getting a confirmation email when you submit, unfortunately, because MS Forms doesn't do that. Or to put it another way, it won't do it for people who aren't in the state, which is not convenient. But if you want confirmation that it went through, just email me and I'll tell you that it went through. And as always, if you have questions about anything, if you're not sure how to answer something, if you're not sure about the way the survey is working, if you have a technical issue, any of that, just get in touch with me. So yeah, so those are the the basic background of it. I'm going to just run through the questions real quick, and I'll do that visually so you can see, and then we'll come back and open the floor to any questions you have. But this shouldn't take too long. So, all right. So I'm going to share my survey, and we'll go under preview mode. Okay. So this is what the survey is going to look like, or already looks like. A little bit of introduction here. Contact information. So library name, your email address. Your name and email address isn't going out publicly. That's just if I have questions, I can reach out to you. Oh, I need to put something in there. Okay, so the first big one is whether you want to anonymize your data. And so default is that you are not anonymous. Your name is going to end up in the big spreadsheet. You can totally decide that you don't want to do that. You're not comfortable with that. So in that case, you'll click make your data anonymous. And as I said, we'll still have access to your name, but it won't go out publicly on anything. And if you do anonymize, your data will still go on all the averages. So it will end up in those. It just won't end up in the big list. Okay. So I will say running. Okay. So we're just going to jump through these, basically. Is the director a volunteer? Yes, no. If the director is a volunteer, you can just leave out everything that involves salary or benefits, which is most of the survey. There will be a couple of questions that you could still answer, but we would like folks who are volunteers to answer it if they can anyway, because that's an important piece of the puzzle in Vermont, and I think we just need to know. We need to know that and have that in the numbers. Okay. Question 6, is there shared leadership with co-directors? There are a few libraries in the state that have co-directors in some fashion. So if that is the case for you, what you want to do is you'll say yes, and then this survey isn't constructed so that you can have 2 directors. So just pick one of your 2 co-directors and put them in the supervisors and equivalent section, which is going to be in staff. Okay. Does the director receive an hourly wage or a salary? And so you just click whichever is yours, and suddenly you'll get the questions for that category. You'll either see the hourly pay questions or the salary questions. So pick whichever you want. So then there are 2 questions based on that. First off is current hourly pay, or if you do it the other way, it is current annual salary. So that's that one is relatively straightforward, and it's as of today. Next one, the harder one that I sort of discussed earlier, is starting pay range of the position we're offered today. So again, that could be challenging to come up with, and might be a question for the board potentially. If it's a thing that if you can't come up with it, that's fine. You can leave it out. We like people, do your best efforts. But if that's a thing that is that you feel like you can't get an accurate number there, that's fine. Okay, so current hourly pay or salary, starting pay range or salary, got those. Okay, from there, paid hours per week, which is how many hours, like it says, how many hours is the director paid per week? How many are they sort of intended to be working? And then next, average hours actually worked per week. So if you were consistently or not consistently working more than you are you were intended to, then you are being paid for, please include that there. All right. From there, okay, so we're on to experience. So first is years in the position. So how long has the director been the director at this library? How many years? Next, years in the library field. How many years has the director worked in the library field in any capacity? Next, at hiring, did the position require or prefer a level of schooling or experience? This is a long list because it has to be. But so options are required an MLS or MLIS plus 5 or more years experience, or preferred the same thing, required in MLS, MLIS, plus 3 years of experience, or preferred. Required in MLS, MLIS, or equivalent experience. And preferred, required a public library certificate or equivalent experience, and then required a bachelor's degree or equivalent experience, or no explicit requirements. Do your best with that. I mean, it may be hard to sort of reverse engineer what the intended requirement was from the listing when the position came up. But yeah, do your best. Maybe ask trustees if they would be of help, and otherwise do what you can. Next is director's current level of education. So for that, we have an MLS or MLIS, a different master's degree and a public library certificate, another master's degree without a certificate, a bachelor's and a public library cert, or a bachelor's degree or other degree, or high school degree, or what have you. So that's what we're getting there. And we're in the home stretch. Okay, benefits. These are all the benefits questions are basically yes/no questions. We're not asking how much of something do you get. We're just asking whether you do or you don't. That's the same in the staff section. Other staff section. So first question, is health insurance offered to the director? This basically means that if the library or the town or what have you offers some form of health insurance with or without an employee contribution, or offers a stipend or some other kind of allowance to you to purchase insurance, that's a yes. If they don't, it's a no. If you can have, for example, a health savings account is also a no. Basically, the question is are they paying for it to some degree or not? If they're paying for it, that's a yes. If they're not, it's a no. Paid vacation time. Does the director have receive paid vacation time? If they use combined paid time off, which is vacation and sick time stuck together, which is something that companies seem to like to do at this point, that's still a yes. Basically, if you have any vacation time, it's a yes. If you don't, it's a no. Next, retirement benefits. Are they offered? Oh, and I should mention, sorry, for health insurance, if it's offered and the director doesn't take it, that's still a yes. We just want to know if it's offered. Same deal with retirement benefits. Are they offered to the director in some fashion? Is there some form of employer contribution towards a pension, a 401k, VEMRs, IRA, anything like that? Is the employer making some sort of contribution or offering some sort of contribution? If they do the logistics behind a 401k, but there's no match or anything like that, it's just you can do it, that's a no. We're basically trying to figure out if the employer is contributing anything to the retirement. Okay, 19. Does your library offer any additional benefits? These are things that are not on that list, but that might be significant to an employee. Do they offer flex time? Do they offer paid childcare, subsidized housing? Do they give you an opt-out for insurance? Is there anything else that they might offer that to sort of sweeten the pot to make the job position a little more enticing? So just write those down if you would. All right, home stretch. Okay, is the director the only staff member at the library? Yes, no. If you are the only staff member at the library, you don't have to fill out part 2. All the questions in part 2 have to do with other staff. So if you are a lone librarian, you're out of part 2. Otherwise, say no. Okay, the last question, and one we had some back and forth on whether we're going to include, but is a gender question. All the questions in this are optional. The gender question is more optional. This is only there to try to tease out whether there's wage discrepancies. That's the only reason that we're asking it. It's only going to be used in the averages. It will not appear in the spreadsheet. We aren't going to do anything else with it. The format that we are using answers are Woman, man, non-binary, prefer to self-describe, in which case you get a field to fill in, or prefer not to say, not sure, etc. Again, no one should feel any pressure to fill that one out. It's just there to try to get at if we're seeing any wage discrepancies. That question only appears on the director side. It's not on the staff side because asking it for multiple staff would be too complicated. So that is basically the survey. Everybody, we're ready for questions now. That was basically the run through of everything. Questions you can just ask out loud. Or you can put in the chat, or you can put your hand up, whatever you want to do. I see a question in the chat from, let's see. Oh, question 20, sorry. I see two questions. So Marie asked, question 20, paid staff member. I'm sorry, what is 20? 20. Sorry, can you, Marie, could you?
It was the question about if the director is the only staff member, but a lot of libraries have volunteers who they consider staff that are not paid. So I just wanted to make sure clarification on that question.
Thank you. No, that's a good one. So we're only, in this context, we're, I think we're only talking about paid staff, but I will need to change the that question to clarify it. Question 20. Thank you. That's a good one, because we do just talk about volunteer directors before that. So, but yes, I think for this survey, except for possibly a director, I think that we are only talking about paid staff. Okay, Lauren asks, can we choose to provide info anonymously and later change the decision? Yes, yeah, we can work with that either way. If you check anonymous, if you don't check anonymous and then you change your mind before we post it, just let me know and we'll flip it back. Or if we get to a certain point and you decide that you are happy to share it, you can just let me know as well. Yeah, that's absolutely something that you can change your mind either way on. I guess it's hard to go back to anonymous from not anonymous if we're already published, but that's the only concern. Amy asks, would you consider dental insurance to be an additional benefit? That is a good point. I think that would be a good spot for that, both dental or optical. So let me, I'll explicitly put that in there. Since we didn't want to go too far into the weeds in the questions on benefits because we knew we could ask like 45 questions about nothing but benefits. And then no one would fill out the survey. So, but I think dental and optical are both things that are sometimes included and would be a good thing in additional benefits. But we can include that. I'll write it so that is specifically included. Additional. All right. Any other thoughts or questions on the survey? So I will say that this is our first try at it, and I'm hopeful that we a little bit threw the kitchen sink at it, and my hope was that we would maybe get maximize the amount of data possible. Our intention is that we will do this again, that it will be a semi-regular thing. I don't know if it will be an annual thing because there may not be that much change and it may be a bigger lift than we want, than directors are going to want to do every year, but we're kind of thinking about every other year maybe. And we may learn a lot this time through and realize that we want to change a bunch of the formats. There may be questions that we didn't ask that people really want to know. There may be questions we did ask that the answers just aren't that useful. So it's going to be a work in progress, but we, rather than having more and more iterations before we put it out, we just thought we would, because I constantly get questions of, is there a salary survey? And I say, no, but hopefully soon. So we just wanted to throw that out there and just see what happens. Margaret says, our select board just conducted a salary survey for all staff in town. That is great. That is a real positive, and I think that is a thing that other people have been doing. I've heard of other folks doing it. It would make it might make filling this out easier, and it also might mean that there's some interesting crossover that you can do from the data that comes out of the library form and the data that your town is going to see from that. Let's see. Amy, I'm going to get right back to you. Marie, you have your hand up if you want to ask.
Yeah, but I've already forgotten what I was going to ask, so never mind.
That's always my routine with the hand thing. So if it comes back, give me a holler. Okay, so let's see. Margaret followed up and said, involved a pretty thorough review of library staff salaries. Be interested to see how that aligns with this information. I will too. I mean, I think that is really interesting, and I think we'll see what it looks like. And you may discover that there are crucial things that your town survey asked that we didn't ask, and that we can think about for next time. Yes, so there's going to be a question at the end of part 2 that is, do you have any more thoughts or feedback or questions? And so that would be a great spot for that. Okay, I'm going to jump back to Amy, and then I'll come up to Marie's question. Amy, quick look at the survey for questions for survey 2 seems to suggest that directors can choose to let it all hang out, so to speak, while staff remain anonymous. Yes, that is absolutely correct. You can totally do that. You can answer the directors; they're totally separate, so you could keep one anonymous and the other not anonymous. And that's totally, I think, is a fair option. We had a lot of back and forth on the anonymous question, I will say, because particularly in small libraries, there's not you're not necessarily obscuring things if there's only 1 or 2 staff in a position, and that's not necessarily always public knowledge. So you totally can, and people should do whatever seems like it's works best for y'all. And let's see. Marie asks, do I think this will become part of the annual survey? Maybe is the answer. Initially, when I started working on it in the fall, well, I guess it was actually last summer, I thought it was going to be part of the annual report, but then at a certain point, I realized that the timing wasn't going to work out that way, because the annual report needs to be kind of set in stone significantly earlier than, whereas if we do our own survey, I can keep changing it up until the last minute. I think we probably won't go to the point where we're going to ask it annually unless we get a lot of people who want that, just because the annual report is already so long that I don't know that I'm going to ask, that we're going to add another annual 80-question survey. But we may think, if nothing else, we may sync the timing up so that it happens at the same time, maybe. I don't know. We're open to a lot of suggestions on that. So if you have thoughts on how this should go forward, please share those at any time. Okay, let's see. Yes, I agree. Hanging out is maybe a little risky until later in the year. Okay, Lauren asks, can VLA or Department of Libraries offer talking points for the conversations that will likely happen if we don't remain anonymous? That is a good question, and as you say, is a fairly big can of worms. We certainly can. I think it would probably work best if I talk to Joy and Jeanette and some of the other folks and see what suggestions they have for, I think you're implying sort of a couple of things, which is conversations for staff members with their information being somewhat more public, and then potentially conversations with the community when they see sort of somewhat more granular information about salary and benefits. Yeah, let me talk to Joy specifically and Jeanette to kind of figure out, suggestions on that. Off the top of my head, I don't think I'm going to give you great advice. So I think we can put something together that does have better advice on that. Okay, let's see. Such as where to find teacher salaries, comparable city manager positions that we should look to. We will. I'll see what we can put together on that front. And I think my jumping out my initial knee-jerk responses aren't going to be as useful. So Rebecca asks if all salary data at public libraries is available. It tends to be, is my understanding. Sometimes it may not be. It may be more granular in some cases than this, but typically salaries are usually broken out by staff members. Sometimes they're kind of lumped together, I think. But you're right. Public people, municipal libraries tend to already have this information somewhat more public, whereas incorporated libraries have a different, may have a different situation. I apologize for my cat. It is. It may be a different. Decision for municipals than incorporated in some cases. But that's something that we can also talk about and get maybe better information and suggestions.
Well, I think that's just part of Public Records Act and freedom of information. If you're paid by government, then everything is supposed to be available. Not necessarily easy to find, but it is legally a requirement to make it available.
And having looked at a lot of town reports, it does. My impression is that it can vary sometimes. I don't know if it's supposed to, but it can. And sometimes it's pretty easy to parse out exactly what everybody is making, and sometimes.
Yeah, mine, Richmond lumps everybody together and doesn't separate the positions, but anybody is allowed to go to the town clerk and say, what does Rebecca's compensation package look like? I mean, it's totally, it's actually, and the town clerk needs to provide that person with that information because it's a municipal government. I mean, it's just like we can't delete any of our emails because it's part of the Public Records Act. So anyhow, you should actually pick up your kitty so we can all see what it looks like.
Oh, yep, here we go. This is Mookie. Hi, Mookie.
Oh my gosh. What a slugger.
He is a lovely cat, though more than a little vocal sometimes. So and she loves when people are talking because then she wants to be in on it. So she loves Zoom meetings and Teams meetings. Let's see. Margaret asked a question about how titles might be the same, but responsibilities are quite different from library to library. So I'm happy to give anybody who wants a little bit of a sneak peek on the staff section of it. But the short version is that different states have used many different approaches for how they wanted to deal with that piece. The fact that libraries don't necessarily have really set in stone position descriptions, that you can't just say, oh, they're a cataloger. All catalogers are the same. Some states have a relatively short list of categories. Some states have 45 different possible positions, maybe more. And so we opted for, because particularly for our first one, we opted for an approach where we put broad categories. We have a batch of broad categories, and that's it. It's less granular, and so the differences of positions, because it's sort of abstracted a little bit. The difference in specific positions are, yes, absolutely. I can totally share. I can just email out. I have some of the other state ones on hand. State surveys. So one thing that's different from most states, is, like I said, they tend to get very granular about salary. They almost never ask about benefits. That's an unusual thing to do. I think there's a sense that it's somewhat outside the scope of their tasks, but I felt like because we were starting from zero, we could do whatever we wanted, and I think it's crucial information. It doesn't. It's hard to get a lot of sense for what's going on if you have no idea what benefits are being offered. So we included that. When will the report be published? So it's closing on April 15th. We May. I will say safely May. I am hopeful early May, but it may be that we do it in a couple of chunks. Like the spreadsheet might come out early because that's relatively straightforward, and then the averages, because we have to sort of figure out exactly how many different things we're going to break it into. That might take a little bit longer, but in any case, May is where I'm hoping that this whole thing will come out. Let's see. Other thoughts or questions?
Well, I do hope this will, get us someplace, because the town of Richmond just commissioned a compensation study, and I've seen some of the preliminary information. And I actually used to be a compensation analyst 35 years ago.
Oh.
But it's terrible. It's absolutely terrible. The comps in there don't make any sense. They're not comparing Richmond to other municipal libraries except for one. And they pulled in a town, Berlin, that doesn't even have a library. And it's like, so why did you do that? It's a small sample. And so I'm also concerned about averages because you can have one outlier who screws up the whole average. So, again, it's the more we have, the better it is. And especially if we can start grouping at least this, I don't know, for me, I guess the largest libraries, that Lara coined, might be helpful, because even if Richmond's grand list is smaller than Essex Junction or South Burlington or Burlington, Chittenden County is still my labor market.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the intention, and we're also open to other ideas, but the intention is to break it down by sort of library size, a couple ways, but also geography, and then services, and anything that seems like it's going to draw useful data, we will probably break it out by.
But there will be a spreadsheet, right?
Yeah. So there'll be two things. There's basically the spreadsheet that's just a list, and then there is going to be another far more contorted spreadsheet that is a series of averages based on all of these different characteristics that we can.
Right, but we would have access to the original spreadsheet.
Yep.
Okay, so we can
so you can do whatever you want.
Data.
Okay. Absolutely. Yep. So so that will it won't include anybody who decides to be anonymous, but it will include everybody else. And then the other averages will include anybody who is anonymous. And also, when we come out the averages, if you don't see one that you like, if you have another idea for one, just let us know, and we can always add.
Well, I do hope that people don't choose to be anonymous. I mean, I think it's really just a lot more valuable to everybody else to have as much comparison as possible.
I agree. I think that it works best that way. We definitely had I don't want to say there were concerns, basically because this is a thing that hasn't been done, I think, is a big part of it. And so we eventually decided that it would giving an option for anonymous would give people would get more people into the end result, and would also maybe people would be anonymous this time and would see that it worked out, and next time around we would maybe have more free non-anonymized data. Lauren asks, will multiple averages be offered, such as directors with MLIS, libraries over 7,000 population, et cetera? Yes, I'm going to try to break it down as many ways as possible into a bunch of different pieces, and as many as I can basically come up with that seem like you can draw any conclusions from them. But also, if I'm missing something, if there's one that didn't come to my mind, just let me know, and we'll add it. Any other questions or thoughts? All right. Well, I think I will let you all go. Thank you so much for taking time out of your days to walk through this and for your interest in the survey. If other questions come up at any time, please get in touch, and I'm happy to figure out what we'll do. And if you have suggestions for how this should go next time, I'm also all ears. So awesome. I'm going to stop the recording. Bingo.